Do you want to learn how to get retired, stay retired, and enjoy your life to the fullest? This is the Retire Happy Podcast with certified financial planner professional Jeremy Finger. Jeremy will be your guide to happiness as he discusses the art and science of retirement, breaking down the complicated information to help you make good financial decisions without worry or burden. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to Retire Happy with Jeremy Finger. Jeremy, what's going on?
Just living life, trying to help people get retired and stay retired.
Love it. Love it. And today you've got a guest on the show today, and I know that you guys have known each other for quite some time. Who'd you bring on?
A really, really good guest here today, Greg Harrelson, who is owner of Century 21, the Harrelson Group, who really has wonderful information to share with us today. He is the owner of 5 real estate franchises with Century 21 and over 200 plus agents.
Wow.
And a recent, I kid you not, recent award recipient of the Artlet Award, and only one agent out of 147,000 agents get that award. So he's been coaching people in the industry for over 20 years, and not just in the U.S. You got some people that dial in from overseas and listen to him talk. So we really have a real good guest here today. It's going to share with us some good information.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. Welcome, Greg.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Thank you. And so, a lot of our listeners are pre-retirees and retirees. So when it comes to thinking about retirement, a lot of times people go and want to buy a home or move or buy a second home. What are some of the things they may need to be thinking about?
Fortunately in South Carolina, or even the Carolinas, including North Carolina, there's, we happen to be 2 popular states for retirees. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And, so as a real estate company and listening to my agents, as well as being an agent, what's interesting is we get calls from people that are thinking about retiring down in the Carolinas. And usually when those calls come in, their first thing is they're thinking about, gosh, you know what? How's the weather? Because they're typically the people are retiring from up north. And so it's amazing during the winter how many phone calls we'll get. And, well, how's the weather? We love the weather. And, it sounds like, okay, well, why would they do that? Well, you got to remember they're dealing with snow, ice, inconvenience at a time that sometimes they're just wanting to retire, they're wanting to relax, and they don't want to have to get outside and cut the grass, to take out the trash while it's snowing is kind of run its course. And so they say things like, how's the weather? But I think one of the things people are considering is how can they get into a more mild climate so they're not inconvenienced and uncomfortable for 6 months or 5 months out of the year. That's one of the things that retirees seem to be interested in. And we know that because they're asking us those questions. Now, typically after the weather, they say, how much can you get? How much house can you get down there for $1 million? And then we're like, well, a lot more than you got right now. And, but it's interesting that, you can kind of get some great insight into one's mind just by observing the questions that they're asking, right? And they're saying, well, gosh, if I sold my house for $1 million or 1.2 in New Jersey, can I replace it? And the reality is not, they could replace it 2 times over. They could probably a $1.2 million house in that area might be a $450,000 house here. So when they hear that information, they're thinking, well, wait, okay, they got all this equity up there. Not only can they replace the house and have an equivalent house here, but they might have an extra $800,000 to invest in their retirement or put wherever they want to put. Generate some sort of income off of that. And that's eventually where the conversation gets to. And then the third question they are, well, what about the taxes? So they say, well, how's the weather? Well, what can you get for $1 million down there? Yeah, but how's the taxes? Well, I'm glad you asked, because the taxes are a fraction of what it's costing in most states, even around the country, where I think we're ranked in the bottom 10 states for the lowest property taxes as a state, and that's the state of South Carolina. So I'm not even really comparing ourselves to just up north, where a lot of retirees are coming from. This is comparing ourselves to, all states. that are in the United States. So those are the things that people are interested in. Those seem to be the talking points that we're involved in when people are thinking about retiring.
Well, it sounds actually quite logical. It's like, hey, I'd like to get out of Dodge, and what's the weather in Dodge, and this is what it's like. So I think one of your agents said something along the lines of they asked about property taxes for this home, and they gave them a number, and they said per month.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, because we definitely, a lot of times when we're helping somebody, whether a retiree or just somebody wanting to relocate, in order for us to best serve them, it's kind of good to understand what their current situation is. What are they accustomed to? What kind of finances or what kind of money do they have going out for their real estate now? And then we can kind of help put them in the right property, but also want to make sure, because most retirees are wanting to also not only replace their standard of living in terms of their real estate, but they also want to improve their financial position. And so understanding what their property taxes are and then educating them, as to what they are when they do come down. People do comment like that. Is that a month? Really? Is there anything else? And the reality is no.
Yeah. So what are some questions that you ask them to, if they're calling down here for that, great. Yeah. And then let's just say, for instance, all right, great, I'm in. What do I need to do? What is the next step, really?
I think the obvious thing is the dialogue that we're going to have back to the prospective family or person who's planning on relocating. We're going to ask them about, are you selling your property there? And have you already sold your property there? Because one of the things, especially for retirees, a lot of times they need to coordinate the selling of one property and then the closing of the new property simultaneously. So the moving truck goes from, I'm just using New York and New Jersey for some reason as hypotheticals, but the moving truck goes from their current home to Myrtle Beach to their new home, and they do not have to actually have a week delay, because where are they going to live, right? Are they going to live in a hotel, and then the moving truck's going to be in a parking lot at Walmart, things like that. So, first thing is, hey, have you sold your home where you currently are? If they say no, okay, when do you plan on selling that? And then if they say, well, we're going to put it on as soon as we find something in Myrtle Beach, well, then are you going to buy in Myrtle Beach and close on that home before you sell your home in New York? Because then at that moment, that's going to tell me whether or not we're going to have to help them with some transitioning housing, or we're going to have to suggest to them or ask them, do they have a place to live in between the two? Right. So, those are the types of questions. When it comes down, that's more logistics. Then we talk about financials on what kind of budget do you have for purchasing a home? Are you going to pay cash? Are you going to, finance it? I'm not asking those questions for myself as an agent. I'm asking to kind of better understand, because if they say I'm going to finance, and then I need to talk about, well, what do they have budgeted for monthly expenses? Because if they're going to finance the house, then that's X amount of dollars. And if they only have X amount of budget, then we may need to go into a community that has no HOA, or maybe they've got enough room in their budget to have a community that has an HOA. So those are going to be questions. And then the third thing I'm probably going to ask is going to be, really tell me a little bit more about the lifestyle that you're looking to have and create for yourself down in our area. Are you wanting to be near the golf courses, near the beach? Do you want to be close to parks? Do you want there to be amenities within the community that you live in? And what amenities are they going to be? Tennis, pickleball, bocce ball? Do you want to know that if there's a bridge club, in the community? Things like that. So if we can get all that information, we know the different communities that we can share, that we can match them with. What we don't know is we don't know the interest of the actual client yet. So that's where we spend a lot of our time on the front end.
Okay. All right. So that's a lot to digest. Do you find that a lot of retirees have already thought of all this stuff, or these questions that you're asking? Oh, well, I never really thought of that. I mean, do they pretty much have an idea, or typically they don't?
For the most part, I would say things that a lot of times they've thought about what the characteristics of a community that they want to be in. We do find, well, you know what? My husband plays a lot of golf, but I don't like golf, or, I like to play bridge. It's like they're a lot of times they're not trying to create a new lifestyle. They're trying to maintain the hobbies that they currently already have. So in that scenario, they already kind of know that. Where the things that most real estate agents probably don't ask them are things like, what is your budget and what's the target for our budget on monthly expenses? That's the question that they're going to be easy to answer, but they're not used to somebody asking that question.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's get back to kind of logistics, right?
Okay.
In one instance, you say, hey, if they could buy this home and without selling the other home,
Yes,
it can make it easier because you can just move directly from one home to another.
Yes.
But you got to be financially in a position to do that.
Yes.
But is there a way to do that if there's not an option to, you have to sell the home first? And like, what are the options
Yeah.
for somebody who is wanting to move from up north down here and really has to sell a home to do it?
Yes, that is a great question, because this is very relevant, right? It's a very relevant question. And so there's a few options. The obvious option is, somebody can maintain and own both homes. Okay. But let's just assume that we're not talking about that situation. Somebody needs to sell up north to come down to Myrtle Beach. In that scenario, a few things they can do, assuming that they have some equity in their home. And right now, a lot of people have equity in their homes. So assuming that they have very healthy equity in their homes, there are mortgage products out there that will do what we call like a bridge loan or a temporary loan, where they'll go ahead and give them the financing for the new home so they can buy it, but then they'll collateralize the equity in their existing home, let's just say up north. So the bank who is going to extend the money out, they're protecting their downside risk by having the second home or the home up north as collateral. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is we have people that will go to their local bank, a community bank, say wherever they're coming from, and they'll go ahead and do an equity line and take an equity line on their existing home to buy their home down in Myrtle Beach. That's another way to do it. If you do the equity line route, there's probably a little bit more expenses that you're going to have to deal with when it comes to your mortgage cost, but it's very viable. It's not that much, but it would be easier to just go ahead and buy the first home and collateral and then let them collateralize than it would be to take an equity line out and then just giving you the cash and then you go do what you want with it. But those are options. Okay. There's another option, and we negotiate this all the time. So if I have somebody that's buying down in Myrtle Beach and they're working with another agent, I'll call that other agent and I'll explain up north to that other agent, hey, they're going to buy a property here. They need to sell that property first. So in order for this to work, they need to sell that property, close on that property, get their money, but they need to negotiate with whoever's going to buy their house that they have 45 to 60 days to still occupy that house in order for them to close on the house in Myrtle Beach and then move down. So we call that, basically, it's kind of like you close and then you do a lease back, but it's a temporary lease for like 60 days. And then if we have 60 days, that would be plenty of time. So you could have your home sold in New York. You could have your home under contract in Myrtle Beach. You could close in New York. You could lease it back for a very small fee, because we can help you negotiate that in the sales price. You can stay there for 60 days. In that 60 days, that's plenty of time to close the Myrtle Beach transaction, move your stuff out and move it down here. So there's multiple ways to do this.
Wow. That's a lot. It sounds like a lot of logistics in doing it that way. And it would be pretty hard to do that, I guess, probably without a real estate agent, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, if you're dealing with a new agent, it'll be hard to even do it with a new agent, because a lot of new agents wouldn't even know these, wouldn't have the experience to know this. So, it's probably one of the reasons why you got to work with somebody that has experience. But this is not as uncommon as, Jeremy, you may think, right? Like, I'm sure there's something in your business that you could explain to me, just like I explained to you. And I would say to you, wow, that sounds kind of complicated. But in your world, you would be like, well, Greg, it's really not. And that's kind of how I feel. Like, yes, I could see how it may sound complicated to somebody who's not doing this every day, but for us, this is kind of like a very routine. Hence why I ask all those questions on the front end. See, if I ask enough questions on the front end and I really understand what the retiree is looking to accomplish, then we've been through the scenario so many times, then we know, okay, we're probably going to have to do a sell leaseback. And it comes to our mind very quickly.
So you're guiding them to help them through this process and taking care of all the legwork to help them make this transition as easy as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And you coordinate this with the other agent up there, I guess, if they
a
have to
lot
sell
of
their
times
home?
we have to, because a lot of times we're dealing with an agent maybe I'm really not involved in the transaction up north, but if in order for me to help them construct the transaction down south, a lot of times I'll have to kind of coach the other agent on, hey, I don't know if you know about this, but if you'll structure your contract on their house like this, then we can actually get this done here. And the other agent's usually extremely cooperative, because my client, the buyer in this scenario, they can't buy unless their other agent structures it like this. So what I'm really doing is I'm helping the other agent structure their contract properly. So they're usually thankful for my assistance. My job's to do whatever I got to do to help my client. If that means I got to make that extra call, then I'm making the extra call.
Right. Well, the one thing that I see within this is that your experience and skill is really, really needed to help the client make the transition. And sometimes it is help. You have to do that by coaching other agents. So let's just say, for instance, a retiree calls down to Myrtle Beach or whatever location, or what are some questions that they need to know, or they could ask their agent to see if they're qualified enough to do things like what you're talking about?
Okay, so I would think that, I'm a strong believer that you need somebody with experience. The challenge is with experience is somebody could be in the business for 20 years, but not necessarily have done a lot of transactions. And I'm not measuring the number of transactions is significant, because that tells you how many different scenarios they've been exposed to. That's what experience is. To me, like, you could take an agent that's only been in the business for 3 years, but has sold 150 transactions, and they may have more experience than somebody that's been in for 10 years, but only sold 32 transactions, right? So I'd be looking for somebody that has deals under their belt, that has been through it. I'd also be looking for somebody who does have a little bit of longevity, so that they've been through different market cycles. And so there's some agents that can say, hey, I did a lot of business in the last 2 years. Well, the market was really hot, so you didn't really have to do much. But if you find somebody that's done a lot of business and helped a lot of people when the market was bad, then that they've got survival skills, and they've probably had to be creative in order to figure things out, to put things together. And so I just look for somebody that has experience in not only some time in the business, but also transactions under their belt. Okay,
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, someone could be a dentist for 5 years, but pulled 2,000 teeth, or been a dentist for 20 years and have only done it a few times. And so that's a big difference.
Yeah. The number of years is only part of the equation, but it doesn't tell the whole story. There's plenty of what in our industry we call, I guess I'm actually becoming one. Like when agents are in the business around 30 years, because I'm just about there, they call them dinosaurs. And so, I'm kind of getting into the dinosaur category. I like to believe that I'm still relevant in the industry, but you could have somebody, the dinosaur that's been in for 30 years, but they've really been disconnected from the market for the last 10.
Right. Yeah. Also, I would imagine like being able to deal in different markets and helping people through transition in different markets, you have to have the difficult conversations to help people through that. Yeah. It's just not, you can't just rely on a good market to cover up mistakes.
Yeah. Here's an example of experience, and maybe it'll touch on, I think I'm going to bring this up if I can, because it's really financial. And I know a lot of our conversations between you and I are financial. We compare the financial, aspects of real estate and versus the financial aspects of securities and wealth building, which you do a good job at. But like, here's a scenario where a lot of people are going to get themselves in trouble right now. Okay. There's going to be somebody that lives in New York and wants to retire to Myrtle Beach. Okay. And let's just assume right now that they've got a lot of equity in their property, but they still have a mortgage and we're just going to make up a number of $500,000. And their mortgage, the interest rate on their mortgage is 3.5%. And here's what they're telling us right now. They're saying, Greg, you know what? I really want to move down to Myrtle Beach and get into that good air and do all these things. And I really want to do it. But I'm going to wait for the interest rates to come down because I've got a 3.5% interest rate right now. And I don't want to actually go buy a home in Myrtle Beach and then go to a 6.5% interest rate. Why would I go from 3.5% to 6.5%? Like, so this is where a lot of agents won't know what to say to this. And I'm like, okay, let's dissect this a moment. Because if we recall, when interest rates were at 3.5%, that's when we had to pay $40,000 over full price for the house because there was multiple bids. And you had to waive your inspection or appraisal contingency. So now we're at 6.5%. You can get a property for under full price, and you can still have the appraisal and inspection contingency. So you can get it for less money. You can protect yourself. If it's a lemon, you don't have to buy it because you got a home inspection contingency. And if it doesn't appraise, you don't have to buy it. When the interest rates were 3.5%, you didn't know if you were buying a lemon because it wasn't, you weren't getting a home inspection. And if it didn't appraise, you had to buy it anyway. So you actually had to pay $40,000 over full price. And when it didn't appraise, you had to pay over the appraised value to buy the property. So here's the right move. Sell your home right now at your 3.5% interest and buy your new home that you want down here at 6.5% interest. Then in a year or 2 years, when the interest rates go down, refinance. And then when we look at and so somebody could say, yeah, but my payments for the 2 years are going to be a little bit higher. Yeah, they're going to be like let's say $200 higher for 2 years. That's $4,800. Or $4,800. Okay. So yes, you're going to pay $4,800 more in interest expense. But if you don't do this, and you wait till you can sell your home where it's at 3.5% interest and you buy down here at 3.5% interest, then the property that you're going to have to buy, you're going to actually buy it for $40,000 more than you have to buy it for today. And then you're going to have to finance that $40,000 for the rest of the life of you owning that property. So technically, for $4,800 is what it's going to cost you to have a little bit higher interest rate before you refinance. That would be a lot better than $60,000 or $70,000 in purchase price increases and interest on top of the purchase price increase. That's where experience comes in, Jeremy.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. What I'm also hearing, Greg, is like they want to make this move and they're going to put 2 years on hold for $4,800.
Yeah. Right. I say this all the time, and 2 years on hold. And here's what I didn't even calculate. If they bought the property, this is a crazy one. You're going to appreciate this one. So remember, I'm saying that it's $2,400 a year more in interest, that as a hypothetical.
Right.
And their property taxes right in Myrtle Beach will be $1,500. Actually, if they're a retiree, it's going to be significantly less because we have something called the homestead exemption, which is the first $50,000 of your property's value you don't have to pay property taxes on. So the retirees get a big break on their property taxes. So really their property taxes might be $900. Okay. Their property taxes where they're coming from is $5,000. So like, even if they had to pay the rest of the interest forever, they'd still be saving money because they reduced their taxes from $5,000 a year to $900 a year. That's a $4,100 a year a gain, and they only have to pay $2,400 more in interest. You're still making over $2,000 a month, $2,000 a year in the positive. So this is, when we talk about retirees and what kind of conversations do they not know they should be having, I think this was one of the better examples, because we're not even addressing their fact that they don't have to shovel snow, because a lot of retirees are willing to shovel snow a little bit longer than they want, because they're really in the forefront of their mind is the preservation of their wealth, the preservation of their assets. So even though they want to move down here, they'll stay up and shovel snow for another 5 years if they think that's what it's going to take to protect the wealth now that they're not at the big income earning years of their life. But they don't know how, they don't know what questions to ask and what conversations to have to figure out whether or not financially it makes sense.
Yeah. So that parallels in my industry a bit. For example, hey, I'm going to stay in this job. I kid you not. I was talking to this lady one time. I'm going to stay in this job for 2 or 3, 4 more years because I need to be able to retire into the future. And I asked her a few questions. I'm like, you could retire today. That you don't have to do this. I just want you to know your work is a choice, and you do not have to stay there. And so getting that mindset, like, hey, guess what? You've already crossed that finish line, and you can choose to do that today. And I can share with you how, just like you share with them, the listeners, on how they can, sell that house and possibly save money by moving.
Yeah.
And guess what? Then live their best life, because that's what they want to do by doing this and not putting life on hold, because we can't get time back. That's one thing we can never get back.
Yeah.
And that can make a meaningful difference in someone's life.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yeah, definitely. And so, it also parallels to healthcare costs too. Hey, now I can't retire now because I got a healthcare cost that I got to consider. Hey, budget that in, just like, just like maybe a little bit higher interest rate. And then over time, like when you hit 65, you're going to have to be on Medicare, and that drops off. When someone moves down here and they buy a home, what are some other things that they consider? Like if family is going to come visit, or do they need to be portable, or have they thought about, instead of buying, renting and being a little bit more flexible for retirees? What are some other things they may need to think about before purchasing?
So outside of the things that we already addressed, I think other things would be, do they have an extra room for their grandchildren to come down and visit? Do they have an extra room for, their daughter or son, or, whoever, their extended family, to come down and visit? So there's always kind of like this tug of war of, I want to downsize because I don't need all this home because we're empty nesters, but I want to make sure we have a space for little Johnny and little Susie to come down and whatnot. So a lot of times they're going to want things like a little extra space and maybe an extra bedroom for that purpose. Medical facilities is always very common. How far is the hospital? How far is the doctor's office, and things like that? Grocery stores, like restaurants, are usually not like high on their list, but the grocery store and the doctor's offices are high on people's lists, because those are things that they're kind of routinely have to do, right? And then low maintenance. Usually they're looking for more of a low maintenance type of property, which means it might be nice to move down, from up north and go get you a big yard. But the challenge is, the big yard, the grass has to be cut, right? And then as we get older and older and older, we might not be able to cut that grass ourselves. So then what happens? We have to hire people, and then our expenses are going in the wrong direction, right? It's all fine and dandy when we can cut the grass, but in 5 years from now, when maybe we're a little bit tired and don't want to cut the grass, now it's the wrong time for expenses to be going up. We want our expenses to be going down in our later years, right? And so I would say size of the yard, like how much maintenance is it going to be for landscaping? How much maintenance is it going to be? Like maybe a wood-sided house that needs to be painted every so many years for a retiree might not be as desirable as a vinyl-sided or a brick-sided house, just because you don't really have to, a brick or a vinyl siding, you're going to pressure wash that. The brick, you're pretty much going to do nothing with it. So these are the things that I would say people are really considering.
Okay. You touched on a good point, being close to doctors and whatnot. How does someone develop a network, right? They're moving from, let's say, up north down here. They don't know what doctor or where to get your hair cut and things like that. You got any comments on like how you can develop a network here when you're kind of new to the area?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that somebody should do is, before they come to the area, they ought to ask their existing doctor to make a recommendation. Like my parents, as you know my parents very well. They just moved from Myrtle Beach out to California to be closer to my brother and my mom's family. And they found their Myrtle Beach doctor referred them to their California doctor. And that's how they found it. So that's one resource that you can use. The other resource is, if you're working with a good real estate agent, a good financial advisor like yourself, we've been in this community for so many years. We're constantly recommending. I don't say we vouch for people because everyone's got different personalities and, you either click or you don't click. But, we do know a really good network, or we have our own good network that we say, hey, here's a list of people that you can talk to. And then I always say, just go interview them. Go sit down with them and see if you're comfortable with that person and comfortable with their resume. But the first thing somebody should do in the medical field is they should ask their current doctor to refer them somebody.
Okay. Good point. A lot of times when people move down here, they're asking me for, hey, who's a good real estate agent? Who's a good CPA?
Yes.
Who's a good insurance person? All of which, while we've taken years to develop that network. And again, you're right. Sometimes people don't jive together, but but it does reduce some of the hurdles that are there.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, because this area is growing a whole lot and prices seem to be going up or have been going up, Greg, is there a difference between like, hey, what are some things to think about if you want to own a condo versus a home? Or is there any differences in that type of lifestyle?
I think it's a personal preference. I think for the most part, like, I don't know what your favorite flavor of ice cream is. Knowing you like every flavor, but mine's mint chip. And
mine too. It's on my website.
Well, my son Lucas, his is strawberry. And the reason I bring this up is because that question is kind of like asking me which flavor's better. And the reality is the flavor that you like is the best flavor for you. They're all great. They're all great ice cream. So whether you buy a home or you buy a condo, that's like, do you want mint chip? Do you want chocolate or do you want vanilla? It's really a personal preference. But one of the things that I think that should be thought about from a condo standpoint for a retiree is that you're never going to get rid of that HOA payment. And the condo HOA payment could be $300 or more a month. I mean, it could be as high as $1,000 if you got into, depending on how big of a condo that you got in. And so that payment never goes away like a mortgage payment will eventually go away. And so I think that's where some people get frustrated is they buy a condo, but then after like 4 years of paying $500 a month in HOA fees, they realize, gosh, maybe I could have bought a house and got, and had a little bit more freedom in a house. And you may still have an HOA fee, but maybe it's, $75 a month or something like that. So to me, again, condo house, that's like chocolate or vanilla, you choose. But when you do choose a condo, just maybe look at those HOA payments and see if that really fits into your budget.
Perfect.
Because it may fit into their budget as an affordable, but there's plenty of people that can afford it, that after a couple years of paying for it, they can't stand it anymore.
It's an aggravation.
Yeah. So a lot of times, Jeremy, the people who retire in condos, they make two moves. They go New York, condo, home. A lot of times it's a two-step process.
Wow. So like long term, based on what you're saying, is that people tend to want to be out of the condo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what I will find is it's more common. Like if somebody goes from a condo to a home, it's because they kind of got frustrated with condo living and HOA. If somebody goes from a home to a condo as a retiree, then that retiree is somebody that strictly wants zero maintenance.
Good point. What about and I had this the other day, this client, I guess they went online to one of those big builders, let's say a D.R. Horton, and they're like, oh, hey, we want to buy new construction. And hey, we need this amount of money down. Okay. But is there what are some of the drawbacks or concerns that someone may have if they just are going online and looking at one community versus, I would imagine if you work with an agent that's been around the area for 20 years, hey, yeah, okay, that's a community, but hey, you might be missing, 5 other options that are out there. Any comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a few thoughts. Actually, there's multiple thoughts because I think there's a few things here to unpack. So as a buyer, you never want to limit your options. When you have options, and If anything, you want to look at all your options, so you're a very informed buyer. And so when you're only just looking at this one option, then you're only hearing that one dialogue. And if you're not working with an agent and you're working with the builder direct, oh, I promise you there's a lot of disadvantages. And I'll tell you, and I'll break down a few of those.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, they're only going to tell you their story. Okay. So, and not that they tell you a bad story, but their story is going to be influenced by their representation of the developer. You're not going to get stories as to how many times people have bought in there and had problems. How many times, were there issues? Like, we are helping somebody buy new construction right now. It doesn't matter what builder it is. And because they're working with us as an agent, they do not pay an extra dollar because the agent's fee is already built into the price of the property. So if they don't work with us and would have went straight to the builder, the price would have been the same. If they work with us, the price is the same. So there's it's already built into the price. You don't get any less if an agent's not involved. It just means that the developer makes that much more. Well, because we're involved, we, contrary to what most conventional wisdom would be, we actually had them make it contingent upon getting a home inspection. Which people are like, home inspection on a new construction? You darn right. They're putting these houses up so darn fast. It's a quantity play, not a quality play. So you've got to have somebody that represents you to actually go and double check on the inspector. The inspector went over there and finds all kinds of things. Like the slab, before they actually closed, the slab was cracked already. Now, which is not uncommon, I promise you there's plenty of new construction homes where slab is cracked, but they got the carpet or the vinyl plank on that slab before anyone ever saw that it was cracked.
No way.
Oh, all day long. In this
Really?
case, not only was the slab cracked, it had rained the day before and there was kind of wet, damp, muddy area outside in the driveway, and the carpet was actually unrolled on the driveway. Getting ready to put that carpet on that cracked slab, and there's already moisture in that carpet. Needless to say, they did not put that carpet in our client's home, and they're dealing with a slab. So the key is a few things here. Most people think, oh gosh, why do I need an agent? You don't. You can roll the dice, but it's not going to cost you to have somebody represent you. There's no cost to having somebody represent you. And these are the things that we do in representation. Now, the builder cannot stand it when there's a home inspector inspecting behind them. They find things. There's never a home that the inspector doesn't find things. Things like the lock is broke on the window. Just little things that they have to go in and they're nitpicking, or, the heating and cooling system is not cooling to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Even though it's new. So those are things people really got to be careful of.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's no cost advantage in going direct. And if you are going to go direct, hey, at least have an independent agent like you or some of the people that you work with represent you, not the builder.
You need representation, period. Everybody should. A builder needs their own representation, and a buyer needs their own. And not only is it not cost effective, they're going to convince you. Here's what they're going to do. Hey, if you write a contract today and you use our mortgage company and our insurance company, we'll give you $500 credit towards a refrigerator. And it's going to feel good. Heck, I would have actually got you cheaper insurance, a cheaper mortgage, and negotiated a free refrigerator. But because there's nobody negotiating for you, then the buyer's going to be like, $500? Great. Yes, we'll use this. It's easy. But you don't realize that the mortgage company and everyone else, the cost of all that stuff is high. It's not market rate compared to what you can get outside of that site.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm not working for one of the big brokerage firms anymore.
Sure.
Because they want you to do all that.
Yeah.
So, Greg, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast here. And with all your wealth of experience, and it's really been a real treat on you just sharing just a little bit of information on what retirees may need to be thinking about before they purchase a home or when they purchase a home. How would they need to get in touch with you if they wanted to utilize your resources and you're as one of your agents?
Yeah. So the company is Century 21, the Harrelson Group. Feel free, any of your guests can, reach out to me. My email is simple. It's greg@c21harrelson.com. greg@c21harrelson.com. Just reach out to me.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much, Greg, for being on the podcast. And thank you very much.
You're welcome. Great
Greg,
time.
this has been fantastic. I love all the information, but the stuff you were talking about at the end there was just driving me crazy, because I follow a couple of people on TikTok that are inspectors, and they're inspecting new homes.
Oh, wow.
And the quality is horrendous. 2x4s not lining up, walls not, things not supporting an entire deck outside. I mean, just the things that I've seen are just mind blowing. So I appreciate everything that you're doing. I know that Jeremy, obviously he surrounds himself with a network of folks that are, obviously a dinosaur, as you said.
Yeah.
You've been in the business a while. So thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Everything you've said is resonating hardcore. Jeremy, of course, thank you for facilitating this and bringing on another amazing guest. Jeremy, folks want to reach out to you. Why don't you give them your contact information as well?
Yep. They can call us at 843-970-1049 or email me at jeremy@riverbendwm.com.
Fantastic. And our last thank you always goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Retire Happy podcast with Jeremy Finger. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Jeremy comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. We humbly ask that you share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this actually does help others find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Riverbend Wealth Management, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Retire Happy podcast with certified financial planner Jeremy Finger. If you have any questions, please visit us at www.riverbendwealthmanagement.com or call us at 843-970-1043. And remember, click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.
Investment advice offered through Stratus Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor doing business as Riverbend Wealth Management. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.